All right, we're about to dive into one of the most epic stories you'll ever hear, the saga of the prophet Elijah. I mean, this is a journey of raw, supernatural power, absolutely dramatic showdowns, and a final exit from this world that just defies all logic.
Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't just any old story. We're talking about this mysterious figure, a man who pretty much appears out of nowhere, takes on kings, raises the dead, and then just vanishes from the earth in a whirlwind of fire.
So the first question is, where did this incredible figure even come from? And that's the thing, it's a mystery. He just shows up on the stage of history, fully formed and ready to start a major confrontation. And this setup creates an incredible contrast. On one side, you've got the court of King Ahab. It's the center of power, yeah, but it's also a place of political maneuvering and just deep spiritual decay. His wife Jezebel had brought in the worship of her god Baal. And for Israel, this wasn't just adding another deity to the mix, it was a total betrayal of who they were. And then, into all of this walks Elijah, a man from the wilderness, no fancy family name, carrying nothing but this raw, divine authority. It's the ultimate outsider versus the establishment.
With no introduction, not even a hello, he marches straight up to the most powerful man in the kingdom and delivers this thunderous message. He declares a drought that's going to bring the entire nation to its knees. And get this, he says it won't end until he gives the word. Talk about a dramatic entrance. So, after dropping that bombshell, Elijah just vanishes. He's now the most wanted man in Israel. So God sends him into hiding, deep in the wilderness. But this is where his faith gets tested and God's power is revealed in some truly mind-blowing ways.
While the rest of the kingdom is literally starving, Elijah experiences one miracle after another. First, he gets fed twice a day by ravens. Then, when the water dries up, God sends him into enemy territory of all places to be cared for by a poor widow. And there, her tiny little bit of flour and oil miraculously never runs out.
This is what the widow says to Elijah when he asks her for some bread. That quote just hits you, right? It shows the absolute rock-bottom desperation she was in. She was preparing her very last meal on earth. And yet she decides to trust this stranger and the God he's talking about.
But then, tragedy strikes. The widow's son dies. And in his grief, Elijah does something that had never been done before. He prays. He stretches himself over the boy's body, and the child's life returns. This is actually the first recorded resurrection in the Bible, a quiet, private moment showing that God has power over life and death itself. It's kind of setting the stage for the big public show that's about to come. Okay, after years in hiding, the story builds to its incredible climax. It's time. Elijah has to step back onto the main stage for one last epic public confrontation. This is the main event, folks.
The time for hiding is over. God sends Elijah directly back into the lion's den to confront the very king who's been hunting him. The stage is officially set for a spiritual showdown that is going to change the entire nation.
So the stage is Mount Carmel, and the odds, they are staggering. It's Elijah, one man, against 450 prophets of the false god Baal. They each prepare an altar and a sacrifice. And the challenge is simple. You can't argue with it. The God who answers by sending fire from heaven, he is the true God.
So the 450 prophets of Baal go first. They're shouting, they're dancing, they're begging their God from morning all the way till noon. And the result? Absolute silence. Nothing. The sky is empty, and their sacrifice just sits there, cold on the altar.
As their desperation grows, Elijah just can't resist. He starts mocking them. He says, "Shout louder. Maybe your God is on a trip, or maybe he's busy, or hey, maybe he's just asleep and needs you to wake him up." Then it's Elijah's turn. And he doesn't just prepare the altar. He goes out of his way to make the miracle seem completely impossible. He has the people soak everything, the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, with 12 huge jars of water, filling up a trench around the altar until it's completely overflowing. Elijah says a simple, calm prayer, and then it happens. Fire doesn't just fall from heaven, it obliterates everything. It consumes the sacrifice, the wood, the stones of the altar, the very dust, and it even licks up all the water in the trench. A total, undeniable, spectacular victory. Now you would think that after a victory like that, Elijah would be invincible, right? But what happens next is one of the most human and honestly relatable parts of his entire story. The tone shifts from absolute triumph to total collapse. The reversal is just shocking. After the massive adrenaline rush of the mountaintop, the physical and emotional exhaustion just crashes down on him. The man who faced down hundreds of prophets is now running for his life from the threat of one woman, Queen Jezebel. He runs into the wilderness, collapses under a tree, and asks God to just take his life. I mean, the emotional whiplash is just staggering.
God meets Elijah in his despair, but not how you might think. He sends a mighty wind that shatters rocks, but the Lord wasn't in the wind. Then comes a violent earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. Then a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire either. And after all that world-shaking power, God speaks to his broken prophet in a still small voice, a gentle whisper.
And in that whisper, God comforts Elijah, telling him something crucial. He was never really alone. See, part of his despair came from feeling like he was the only one left, but God reveals that there are 7,000 others in Israel who have stayed faithful. What a profound comfort that must have been to hear.
Restored and refocused, Elijah's work on earth comes to a close. But his departure from this world is every bit as spectacular and unprecedented as his life was. The time comes for him to pass the torch. He finds his successor, a young farmer named Elijah. And as a final request, Elijah doesn't ask for power or for wealth. He asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit, basically the inheritance of a firstborn son, to carry on the mission.
And then, the moment that has defined his legend ever since. As he and Elisha are walking along, a chariot of fire, pulled by horses of fire, comes down from the sky. It separates the two men, and Elijah is taken up in a whirlwind directly into heaven. He is one of only 2 people in the entire Bible who are said to have never actually experienced death.
And that leaves us with this final thought. Elijah's life was full of spectacle, right? Fire, drought, resurrections. But his most profound, life-changing encounter with God came in the quietest moment. So the question to really ponder is, what does it mean for true, lasting power to be found not in the earth-shattering displays, but in the still, small whisper?